Hi everyone. Today I'm going to continue on with my discussions of the films of 1973. Before I do that, I want to do a shout out to another YouTube channel that I just discovered a couple weeks ago, Neil's Movie Channel. It's relatively new. He has some great content. He does great commentary on the movies that he discusses, and I will leave a link in the description box below, and I encourage you to go out and check out his channel. Back to 50 years ago, and I'm going to talk about High Plains Drifter, Clint Eastwood's second directorial effort, but his first Western. His debut was Play Misty for Me, which was a contemporary thriller. Here he's gone back to the Western. And it's a very accomplished movie. This is a 4K UHD from Kino. It looked absolutely gorgeous to me in Dolby Vision. The story is relatively familiar. A stranger enters town. The townsfolk all look at him wondering who this man might be. He shows the town that he is quite adept at killing people. This town needs somebody to protect them because they have sort of arranged for 3 psychotic killers that they've used for other purposes, but they needed to get them out of town, so they sort of arranged a crime that they committed. They get arrested when they're drunk. They're in prison. They're getting out, and these psychotic psychotic murderers that have helped the town before are now vowing to go back to the town and destroy it. This is a town full of people that are cowards. They cower in fear at the stranger, and so they offer him, you can have whatever you want, protect us. So this is sort of a take on the Seven Samurai, the Magnificent Seven. Only here we have a town that doesn't even seem like it's worth saving, and we learn early on that the stranger himself might have other motives. So it's almost the entirety of the movie is set in this town and some of the landscapes around it, and a beautiful setting by a lake in beautiful light high up in the Sierras of California. But we get it almost from the first moments of the film, we get that this is going to be Eastwood's homage to Sergio Leone. This is the man with no name. He comes out of the heat waves of the distance, and he looks like the man with no name. He's got this cigar that he's chewing on, and we get situations from Eastwood's collaborations with Leone. So we get a gunfight from a barber's chair, a health tub shootout, explosion in a hotel. We get the cigars, but and there's many other, in the commentaries they point out some of the other instances where Eastwood is referencing his films with Leone and other spaghetti westerns by Sergio Corbucci in particular. And he is the kind of character that he, like with Leone, he sort of exists out of time. He's sort of like come from another planet. And with Leone's movies, they were so mythic, his characters, and they don't seem to mesh with society at large. They seem to be like almost like, well, they're super killers, but for instance, like in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, when Eastwood and Eli Wallach confront the Civil War, an actual historical event, and they go through the trenches with the lieutenant, they seem out of place. They don't belong in this real world. So it's relatively the same here, where Eastwood is kind of a supernatural figure. And this is a revenge tale, for sure, and it employs flashbacks, Leone and other Italian spaghetti westerns used. But it goes off into a couple other areas. It becomes sort of like a gothic western, a ghost story. And it reflects, I think, a couple of attitudes that Eastwood has throughout his career, which is this abhorrence of civilization itself, of the community. This is the community, the world that we live in, the world of this Western town. They're cowards, they're hypocrites, they're greedy. They're not really worth saving. And of course, this is a revisionist view of the Western. There's certainly psychology had entered the Western in the 50s, but the whole concept of the myths of the West had really taken a blow, and the whole concept, the myths of American history had taken a blow by the Vietnam War, and this reflects it. And in fact, John Wayne was so offended by Eastwood's portrayal of this Western town. He said, "That's not the way it was." I mean, they were hardy souls. They had, they had to be really tough to do this. And Alex Cox, in his commentary, there's 2 commentaries in this release, and Alex Cox says too. He said, "How could these nincompoops, these cowards, how could they have ever built a town high up in the Sierras? There was an Indian war in a location not far from where this film was produced." But I think it does reflect Eastwood's view, Dirty Harry view, and I'm not an expert on Eastwood's films, but I think that is a constant theme, and reflecting what his libertarian viewpoint in politics, that government is bad. And so that's one area that's kind of interesting as far as Eastwood's subsequent career, but also his attitude towards women. And this is where the film High Plains Drifter really gets problematic, because early on in the film, before we really know what's going on, Eastwood rapes one of the women in town. She has given him some sass, and he just grabs her and throws her in the hayloft in the barn and proceeds to rape her while she's fighting back. Of course, by the end, she's enjoying her adventure with this stranger. And perhaps this is not a view. I mean, this rape scene was commented upon in 1973, but it's interesting how it was sort of glossed over. And I will admit that because the story is not really literal, some of what we learn later on is somewhat of an explanation of his behavior here. But it does indicate, I think, another thing that I've always noticed in Eastwood films is women are just automatically attracted to him. He is the alpha male. Because we not only had that one rape, later on we have another one. And this one is not quite as violently protested. And there's really only 2 women that we see. There's some old women in the background shots, but these are really the only 2 women we see. And she too enjoys her adventure, her hour in bed with Clint, the stranger, and her life is actually transformed by it. It's such a magnificent experience. So again, sexual politics-wise, this film has its problems today. Now, I didn't care. My recollection is a little vague in this film because I so admired the Leone films. I gave Clint the benefit of the doubt quite a bit along the way. But I've always been sort of mystified by how Clint builds up his sexual aura. Like in The Beguiled, he didn't direct that. All these women in an isolated southern boarding school for women all fall in love with him. And that's just a natural course of events in an Eastwood film. Now I have to talk about, I want to get back to the Dolby look, which I thought was great. Now Dolby's a little bit darker than or UHD in general, is a little bit darker than Blu-rays, but this was meant to be a dark film. It's filmed by Bruce Certisi, who was the son of the famous cinematographer Robert Certisi. This is early in his career, and he was much influenced, as all filmmakers were in that period of the 1970s, by Gordon Willis's photography, where he did, in fact, emphasize darkness. And Dolby really handles that darkness so well. I mean, in the beginning I thought, boy, did they really mean this film to be this dark? And then in the commentaries, we learned that in fact they did, deliberately. But everything you need to see comes out so beautifully out of the darkness, so beautifully lit. And Bruce Certisi would go on to photograph many of Eastwood subsequent movies. And the production designer, I think he's called the art director, he gets a very minimal credit, was Henry Bumstead. Now, Bumstead was a veteran Hollywood designer and had worked with Hitchcock. In fact, he designed Vertigo. He also designed The Sting, which is a '73 movie that I discussed a couple videos back. So he built this town right next to the lake, and it's just absolutely great. You know, the studio, of course, wanted him to do it on the back lot, but Eastwood drove his pickup truck all through the Sierras, found the spot he really wanted that hadn't been used before, right next to a lake. But Bumstead also built the interiors right at the site. So I think they did a bit of post-production back in Hollywood, but for the most part, all these interiors are photographed in these buildings of the town that Henry Bumstead built. And so you get, the big advantage there, and of course it's dark, but the big advantage in the daytime scenes, you get the light, the incredible light of the Sierras and that light shimmering off the lake. You feel it in the interiors. So this was a really interesting look that Dolby Vision really picks up well. So we have two commentaries on this in this Kino release. One's by Steve Mitchell and Nathaniel Thompson, and they're very informative. They talk a lot, or they give you a lot of great information in the elements of the film that harkens back to Leone and his Eastwood's experiences with him and how this film is influenced by him. But it's basically a fanboy kind of commentary. I think you know what I mean, where Eastwood could do no wrong. I mean, just everything is just great, every shot. But then we get a second commentary with Alex Cox, and Alex Cox will have none of that. He likes this film, he admires it greatly, he thinks it's a big step in Eastwood's development as a director. But he's willing to show you some of the flaws in the movie. Now, I mentioned the rape scene, but the scenes that really bothered me the most were the whipping scenes. We see it, we see a little bit of a distance, but most of it we see close up where a man is being whipped. And just constantly, it's very prolonged. But we not only get one whipping scene, but then we get it again later on. These are the flashbacks. We get another whipping, the same scene, seen from a little bit different point of view, but also prolonged and very difficult for me to sit through. Alex Cox rightly acknowledges that this scene is way too long. He thinks the film itself is way too long, and he points out other scenes that he thought really didn't have to be in the movie. I love these kind of commentaries because they go against the norm of it, and Cox gives you that kind of idiosyncratic look, his own personal look at the films. And he wrote a book on spaghetti westerns. So, I mean, his this is from the great silence, you know, and this is the screenplay was by Ernest Tidyman, who I believe won the Oscar for The French Connection. He didn't write a whole lot of screenplays, and he wrote it from a treatment. Now, it doesn't say anywhere in the commentary and the supplements who did this original treatment. I suspect Clint had a big hand in this treatment. Okay, so another very interesting movie from 1973. They don't make movies like this anymore. So now, next up will be I'm going to return to some recent February 2023 releases, and that will include The Lady from Shanghai. And this is a Kino release with Rita Hayworth, Orson Welles, directed by Orson Welles. It doesn't have two commentaries. No, it has three commentaries on it. Tim Lucas, and then another from Imogen Sarah Smith. These are brand new ones, and then an archival commentary with Peter Bogdanovich. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take